Good morning. Welcome to the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, OWD, Employer Roundtables. My name is Trin Nguyen. I'm the director of the agency, and it is my pleasure to moderate such a great panel. We all know the pandemic and COVID-19 has been detrimental to the economy and the labor market. Boston's current unemployment rate is 18.9%, and it was 2.6% in February 2020. So you can understand the economic detriment that has impacted our community, particularly the hospitality industry as well. To better help community colleges, training providers, and partners prepare their participants and students for the COVID-era workforce, the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development is launching a series of virtual panels to disseminate the latest research on labor market trends and hiring needs in Boston's major industry sectors. This morning's employer panel will focus on hospitality, and then later on in September, we'll also have construction and retail, and then following that, IT and tech employer panel. Please sign up for our listserv to receive the invites and latest updates. This morning's panel is co-sponsored by Best Core. I want to thank Marie Downing for all her support and work in putting this panel together, along with the volunteers and staff of both agencies, Best Core and OWD. I want to also thank SkillsWorks at the Boston Foundation and United Way of Mass Bay for their collaboration on these panels. For this morning's hospitality employer panel, we will open up the forum with our labor economists and with research and data from Dr. Alicia Sasser-Modestino, Associate Professor, School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs, Department of Economics, Northeastern University. Then we will open it up for conversations with our following panelists. Our moderator will be Luther Pinkney, Senior Program Manager at Best Core Hospitality Training, followed by our panelists, Salman Chaudhary, owner, Shanti Acquisition LLC, Shanti, Maska, Om, and the Dudley Cafe. We also are joined by David Colella, Vice President and Managing Director, the Colonnade Hotel, and last but not least, Rama Ferrer, Area Director of Human Resources, the Newberry, Boston. We want to first thank all of our panelists for taking time from their busy schedule to join us and share with us their expertise, resource, and guidance. The final section of the forum will conclude with a Q&A. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions or resources to share, please send them along with your name and affiliation in the chat box located in the right corner of your screen, and we will share them with the larger group. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on our website for those who would like to revisit and or attend the webinar that wasn't originally scheduled. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Alicia Modestino to provide the current labor market overview in Boston's hospitality industry. Alicia?
Thanks, Trin. Justin, do you want to load the slides? There we go. Phew. Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm going to give you an overview of labor market trends in the hospitality industry. If you could go to the next slide. So I think this should be the first slide every economist talks about when giving a talk on economic conditions in the labor market during the pandemic. And that's because there simply can't be an economic recovery without sustained containment of the coronavirus. When this chart was made on Saturday, there were 405 new cases and 16 new deaths in Massachusetts. And as you can see, we've kept a fairly low caseload through the reopening, but there's a slight uptick recently with more reported cases on Nantucket and other parts of the Cape. If we want to keep people working, I can't stress enough that we have to keep doing the right thing with wearing masks, social distancing, and staying home when we're sick. And this might sound like we've beaten this drum so much, but you heard how frustrated Governor Baker was during last week's press conference. And it's really just not a matter of lives versus livelihoods. The two cannot be separated. You can go to the next slide. And the reason why I say this with such confidence is because of this chart. So this shows you the trend in job postings from January 2019 through the present. What I want you to notice is that job postings, along with lots of other economic activity, started declining at the end of February, well before any shutdowns and even well before the spread of the disease beyond what was happening in Seattle. Why is this? Because people are smart. They read about what's happening in their local area or other places, and they make decisions based on what they think is safe for them, their families, and their business. People don't feel safe, they don't go out, they don't spend money, and then we're right back where we started. You'll also notice an uptick in postings right around each phase of the reopening as restaurants were allowed to host outdoor and then indoor dining, and hotels were reopened. But keep this in mind that it's really people's behavior in response to the virus that's going to drive economic activity, no matter whether or not we shut anything down. Next slide, please. No other industry was devastated like the hospitality industry during the pandemic, when restaurants and hotels were shut down and have yet to fully reopen at their previous capacity. Massachusetts Restaurant Association President Bob Lutz warns the state could lose up to a quarter of their restaurants permanently. And indeed, we've seen a number of restaurants, iconic restaurants close, like Bella Luna in JP, Restaurant Dante in the Sonesta Hotel, Great Scott in Alston, a place where I hung out a lot as a BU student, gone. Another BU landmark, historic landmark in Kenmore Square, the Hotel Buckminster. So we are losing restaurants, hotels, cultural institutions from the pandemic. And as a result, this chart is showing you that nearly 16,000 Boston residents continue to receive unemployment insurance benefits in the accommodation and food services industry during the last week of June. That's more than twice the number of recipients in healthcare and social assistance, which was the next hardest hit industry in the city. And moreover, as the economy reopened, there's really not been any improvement in the number of individuals receiving UI benefits in the hospitality industry. So if you look at that top red line between phase 1 and phase 2, as outdoor dining reopened, we saw a small bump up between the two phases as workers who were furloughed realized that they would not in fact be recalled because of some of these permanent closures and also the fact that everything's operating at a reduced capacity. Next slide, please. Of course, when we think about the hospitality industry, we think about chefs and wait staff and bellhops, but actually the hospitality industry also employs industries across a wide range of affected occupations, including things like office and administrative jobs. So think about hotel clerks, business and financial jobs, think about event planners, building and maintenance jobs, housekeepers and landscapers, and personal care workers. So think about gaming and entertainment workers. Next slide, please. Okay, so we know that we've reopened most parts of the economy in Boston. So where are we now in terms of the labor market? Well, not as far along as we would like. So between March and April 2020, the leisure and hospitality industry in Boston lost 110,000 jobs, a 60% reduction. That's the devastation that we're talking about. And so far, we've only recovered almost 39,000 jobs, or about 1/3 of the jobs that were lost. And according to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, more than 1/3 of US hotels haven't rehired any furloughed staff as of July 29th, 2020. So there's a lot of people waiting to be recalled who are sitting on unemployment. Most of the job loss occurred in food services and drinking places, which also is where we see most of the rebound thus far, with restaurants reopening at least for outdoor and indoor dining at a reduced capacity. And it's not clear when those capacity constraints will be lifted to allow for more hiring. In fact, epidemiologists right now are looking at the recent rise in caseloads in Massachusetts and suggesting Governor Baker even roll back some of the reopening. Although the hotel industry suffered a slightly less decline on a percentage basis, losing only half the jobs in the sector between March and April, still devastating, this sector actually has been slower to recover, regaining only 1 in 10 jobs lost. And this is a lot has to do with obviously the hotel capacity and the occupancy rate. So US hotel occupancy rose to about 44% as of June. but the overall rate is still very low, and it's even lower here in Boston. So in June, the occupancy rate in Boston was about 26%. And in some other major markets like New York, it's actually dropped. Next slide, please. In terms of hiring, prior to the pandemic, an increasing share of jobs had been looking for key positions that had some kind of high school vocational training or even a bachelor's degree. As hiring fell during the pandemic, a lot of this hiring shifted towards reducing some of these requirements. And you'll see in the right-hand side there, those bars where there's not even a level of education that's specified right now because of the shift in the kinds of hiring that's been happening. Next slide. In addition, among the top 20 most frequent jobs in the hospitality industry, there's been a shift from wait staff, food runners, prep cooks, sous chef, front desk agents, and housekeepers, and towards things like delivery drivers and managers. So if you think about this, it looks like a hollowing out, if you will, of the hiring, for example, in the restaurant industry, where we're doing a lot of takeout, or we had done a lot of takeout. There's still very limited capacity in terms of indoor and outdoor dining. And so we're seeing fewer wait staff and other kitchen staff that are being hired right now, and moving towards the kinds of jobs that we need in order to make those operations still run. And the same thing in the hotel industry, where we're seeing a shift away from front desk agents and housekeepers as the occupancy rate is still very low. Next slide, please. Among the top 20 most frequent skills that are required right now in hospitality, there's been a shift away again from management skills, loss prevention, housekeeping, and procurement towards things like equipment repair, inventory management, physical abilities like driving, and financial management. So these two figures here are showing you all of the different skills, the top 20 skills that were required in the second quarter of 2019 compared to the second quarter of 2020. And each box, the size of the box, tells you how frequently these skills were required. And you'll see some of these boxes, like the ones that I've mentioned, like loss prevention, housekeeping, procurement, they're not even in the top 20 anymore because that's not where any of the hiring is right now. And instead, we've shifted towards trying to manage inventory, lots of delivery drivers in the restaurant industry, and financial management. So there's still hiring that's going on, but it's shifted in terms of the skills that restaurants and hotels are looking for. Next slide, please. So where are we and where do we need to go? Right now, Massachusetts has the highest unemployment rate in the country. We're at 17.4%. And a lot of that's due to our greater initial exposure to the coronavirus and the impacts on key industries like hospitality and tourism, among others. The leisure and hospitality industry obviously suffered the most devastating job losses, losing 60% of the jobs, mostly because restaurants and hotels were shut down. And the recovery's been really slow, particularly among hotel workers, as we've really seen that occupancy rate remain very low. Employers are hiring, but the demand shifted away, again, from those wait staff and kitchen staff and towards delivery drivers and managers. And according to a Wall Street Journal survey of economists, the labor market's not fully expected to recover until June 2023. So that's 3 years from now when we will be expected to hit something like 5% unemployment. And 5% is not even where we were, but it's certainly much better than the 17.4% where we are right now. And that rosy projection assumes that we get the virus under control here and in other parts of the country. So really, in terms of a labor market picture, this points to a long-term need for employers and workforce development institutions to collaborate on retraining if retraining is needed. So are there different types of skills that are needed within these workforces? Providing worker supports. There is was a slow-moving, now a fast-moving childcare crisis that is happening across the United States right now, with lots of schools not reopening in person. And certainly these are all in-person jobs where parents would need childcare. And also to rethink how work is organized across these different positions. We've seen a shift in the mix of things that are being done. It might be the case that workers need to be doing multiple roles at the same time. and increase the flexibility in terms of the kinds of things that they can do. And with that, I will hand it back over to Trin and Luther to turn to our panelists.
Great, thank you, Alicia. I mean, that provides a great overview for some of the things that our panelists are brought here to share their guidance and their expertise. Luther Pigdy is our moderator, and he will ensure the full participation of our panelists. And reminder for folks who have questions, you can put that in the chat box on your right-hand side. Luther, gonna turn it over to you to moderate.
Good morning, all, and thank you for your time. Again, thank you to the panelists. Very trying and busy time, so I'm glad that we're all able to get together. Now, not in current history has this industry had to deal with such low numbers of occupancy, especially in the city of Boston. We thrive on tourism and business travelers here. It's we always know to take care of our staff because our staff is who takes care of our guests, and that's our commodity. So we want to talk to some of these experts today about how we take care of our staff and how that's translating or will translate into coming back and us getting back to the numbers we want. I want to start with Rama and just say thank you and ask you what skills are going to be needed to fill some of these positions now that were different before.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rama Ferrer. I'm the Area Director of Human Resources for Hyatt Hotels, mainly in the Newbury, Boston, but also Moxie Downtown Boston and the Greater Providence. And that's a very good question, because in terms of skills, usually in the hospitality industry, we look for service, right? Attitude is very important. Yes, we would need specific skills, like is it going to be an engineer or is it going to be related to food services? But one of the things that I can see for the future, it has to do what one of the things Alicia mentioned, which is adaptability, is the flexibility we have, not only on the people that we will hire, but also in our returning staff, that we need to adapt to our guests and customer needs. So if things change for the market, we need to move quickly with that. So roles will be, I guess, changing or morphing as things go. So in terms of safety, of course, but also the level of service we're going to provide. And obviously each hotel, each restaurant, or each area, because it will be tour providers, there's different things that are going to be modified. And it's important that we understand that, and I call that emotional intelligence, but it's really the attitude. You can teach skill, but it is more difficult to teach attitude. So people that have the right attitude that say, let's do this together, those are the people that are going to have an opportunity and an advantage to rebuild the city. And Alicia said 2 years or almost 3 years to rebuild. My theory, and it's my personal experience, because I worked 20 years in Puerto Rico and I work in the Florida Keys, and I've been 6 years in Boston, is that this is an amazing city. The level of resilience and energy and organization and follow-up of rules, it's amazing. So I know Boston is going to come back. Once things start moving, it's going to come back stronger than every other city and every other market. But in the meantime, we need to look about what are the things that we're looking. And going back to your question, Luther, yes, it's not going to be just about the experience. It's going to be in the process of hiring what that individual can bring to the experience of our guests, so they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they feel secure. So it's that personal touch that would make the difference. It's not just a job that, you know, like manufacturing or the areas that you just need to do a task and that's it. It's your interaction with the people that is going to make the difference. And if I go to a hotel and I feel welcomed by a staff, that makes a big difference, because then it feels secure and I can come back. But if I don't have the level of service that is required, just with the safety and the precautions that are needed, but also how do we convey a smile if we have a mask? Have you thought about it? You know, can you do it with your eyes? There's things that you can do to make sure that if there's things that are different, how you still provide that charm, why people come back. You know, people can get things delivered if they want to, but they want to go to restaurants, they want to go to hotels. Sometimes they need to, but what about the people that want to enjoy things? Because they want to be serviced, they want to be treated, they want to be cared for. So it's so important that we think about being flexible, but it's really adaptability. Managing change as things come. So if it's masks for now, we'll work and we clean up as good as we need to. And if it's in 3 weeks, we need to do something, what do we need to do? And some places will have to do job combinations, but the way I see it is, how do we help each other? So if another department is having to work extra hard, how we work as a team? It's not just the guest experience or the client customer experience, is a whole. They don't say, oh, it's that department or that person. How do we work together in a team to make sure that the experience is conveyed?
Awesome. Solomon, your vast restaurants, you cover the full gamut from fine dining to a neighborhood cafe. People are not afraid to eat your food right now. Uber Eats, as we've seen the slide from Alicia, people like delivery and Uber Eats, those things are working. What can the staff do to make people more comfortable coming in? We talk about the education system, the kids need this social interaction. As adults, we do as well. What are we doing and what are we doing to prepare our staff to make that happen for our guests?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to be in this platform to speak. So our, we have from sit-down restaurants to fine dining to I have experience, and then we also have a cafe where a lot of walk-in customers that guests will come in. One of the things we basically saw was that through this pandemic, one of the key driver was all this Uber Eats and Grubhub, and they kind of like came in and filled a gap where a lot of the restaurants where they didn't have a platform to do takeout and delivery as much because they concentrate on more on sit down and dining, and because a lot of the guests, that's what they were expecting, and that's what they wanted. But things changed, so Uber Eats, Grubhub, they kind of came in and filled this gap for some of the small restaurants. But in return, the split that they were taking, I felt like that it was unreasonable. So we kind of changed our, even though we were doing takeout, we didn't actually sign up with Uber Eats or Grubhub because business-wise, the number didn't make sense. So we kind of basically took some of our staff that was already working in the dining room, that was working on other things, that we kind of just basically gave them the opportunity to be basically the delivery driver or help in the process. And we also let our guests know that, hey, times are different. And one of the things we saw was that the guests that supported us went out of their way to kind of like use the service that we provided instead of going to, even though the process with Grubhub and Uber Eats are easier to place the order, they have a big, huge platform that they could, they invest money on, and small businesses didn't have that. But we saw that the guests actually went out of their way to use our website, call us in to put their order. So, we kind of like went away from using cash, contactless delivery. We'll have guests who will just come park in front of this restaurant, and we'll have somebody go out and drop the food in their car. They can open the trunk. So we kind of like retrained a lot of our employees to kind of like be part of the change. And so we didn't really have to cut down in our staff. We actually end up using same staff that we had, and our businesses actually, we did much better. Our businesses actually went up because of the way we were doing as the service that they got from us. So it actually helped our business throughout this pandemic to put the takeout and delivery. And there is a way to. My wife is actually works more on this to see if there is any way to legislate, like what are the commissions that Uber Eats and all these delivery companies are charging. Because if there is a limit of what they can charge, then we can use some of that money for our marketing and things like that. Hopefully.
Mr. Kalala, how are you? Mr. Kalala, you run one of the city's oldest hotels. You're the longest running general manager in the city. So I happen to know lots of people eyes on you on what direction to take. Can you tell us about the current state of your hotels and what's going on, when we're going to start opening and hiring?
Thank you, Luther, and thank you for having me be a part of this conversation and for me to share some of my thoughts today. So yeah, Solomon just spoke about the restaurant side, and Raymar made some very strong comments as well on the service piece and the skill sets. Your question is very general in terms of the hotel, but I'll try to be specific in some of it. We're not open yet. The hotel has not opened. We're one of a number of hotels that have chosen not to open yet. We're looking at sort of a three-phased approach with three pieces of the hotel opening one after another. We took the liberty of opening our rooftop pool, which is a very popular spot in the city, from May through mid-September. And we did that firstly because it's very, it's always been well received by the Back Bay neighborhood and the South End, and having this kind of weather, it was a sort of a good place to start. What we've seen since we opened has given us an opportunity to practice the protocols that we've written for the hotel and every department of the hotel. We've taken that time since we've been closed with our senior management team to write protocols for every department and individuals throughout the hotel, key people. It's been going very well. The interaction with guests and not only does it seem that it's a good place to start for us in a small scale. It allowed us to see the interaction with guests at the pool and see their reaction to how we're operating and how they react to the new protocols, which are becoming the new best practices in our industry. But it's also given us an opportunity to plan the protocols, test the protocols, purchase the PPE pieces that are necessary in this going forward. It's been a good look for us as to what to expect going forward when we open the hotel in phase 2 and the restaurant in phase 3. We just completed recently in March a $28 million renovation of the hotel and adding a new restaurant. We finished that in March and opened the restaurant in March, and 4 days after we opened the restaurant, we closed due to the pandemic. And so we're anxious to get everything open again, and we're taking it one step at a time. But and as Raymer pointed out, we will get there, all of us. Not immediately. It's a long road for all of us, and it's a bumpy road, and it's been tough on our industry, but we'll get through this.
This question is for any of the panelists, and we wanted to talk about what the expectations of guests and how that's changed through the pandemic, and what we're doing to try to, as we said, Raymond brought up, it's hard. How are we getting about, how are we going to go about providing that service and meeting our guests' expectations, and what can we do to start training past staff, because we know we have thousands of people that we want to bring back on, and then new staff to do this in the new world. And feel free, any of the panelists, to try to explain that. How are we going to meet the expectations of our guests?
Well, I'll start. This to me is probably one of the most important pieces of everything that we'll discuss. You talk about the expectations of our guests. It's always been about, in the hospitality industry, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, catered events, it's always been about the experience, but it's been about the food, it's been about the service. That's still going to be an important piece, but I think in this new world that we're in for quite some time now, what we're going to see is that guests are going to be, it's not about the food or service as much as it is about how they trust the place they're going to be eating in and socializing within. It will be how we make them feel comfortable. What place are they more comfortable? where can they go that they sense and see the concern of staff and managers, that protocols are being followed, that there's a caring bond between management and staff and the guests. And I think that's going to be the biggest piece. I was in a restaurant, and just a real quick one, I was in a restaurant recently, and I didn't spend more than 5 minutes there because and I'm not normally squeamish, but when you're in this side of it and you're following these protocols and you understand them, you understand that how a guest can feel too. And I didn't stay more than 5 minutes when I realized that the protocols that we've been following, that we're all supposed to follow, and which is the new normal, as we say, weren't. And I think that's going to be really important. And the guests need to see, and with our employees, they feel safe as well, that they feel secure, that they've not just been given PPE, but they've had the proper training and they're happy to be there, and there's no concern from them as to them being in that environment. So I think that's going to be, probably one of the key elements going forward.
I'll just jump in with some survey data that I've seen that really echoes what David was saying about feeling safe. So a survey that we did just on social media, so it's not scientific, but of Boston residents, a lot of them said they had not gone to a restaurant because they were not certain that the protocols that were in place, were going to keep them safe, or were always being followed in the places that they went. And so I think there's a huge need to educate the public, get their trust, but also get everyone on the same page. Because the other thing that the survey revealed was the respondents were not just worried about the restaurants and the staff following the protocols, but the other diners following the protocol. And that really calls upon each one of us, again, to, I can't say this enough, to do our part, where if you want to be dining in a restaurant and you want things back to normal, the best thing you can do is wear a mask, follow the protocols that everybody is doing in the restaurant. If you want to support the restaurant industry and the hotel industry, everyone just has to do their part so that we all feel safe and comfortable going to these places.
And I would add to that, trust is very important, David, what you said, but I think trust is an emotion. If you think about it, trust is earned. So it has to do with confidence, and now after the pandemic, it has to do with safety. So that's something that as you walk out for that restaurant because you didn't feel comfortable, that trust is something that we need to create in the team first. So our staff is so important that they feel they trust the company they work for, the restaurant, the rules, what is going on, so they can portray that, and that could be communicated. So I guess the key is the confidence, customer or guest confidence, and how we get that, how we get there. And that's the type of level of skill that has to do with really good communication. Because if there's a change in any regulation, how fast are we going to it? How we adapt to our customer needs? Or if we see a trend, are we watching what people are asking in the restaurant? And just like it could be in hotels, maybe people would not like daily service. And we'll have to accept that because they don't want people, but maybe people want more service. So what is it going to be, and how are we going to adapt with the best face, and how do we show our smile without showing our face, probably, and that is that communication that will give that trust that will bring us back. Thank you.
I just want to echo also Rima on that. One of the things we have done is on a constantly, almost on a weekly basis, we send out an email blast to our guests, letting them know the things that we are doing different, the steps that we are taking to adjust ourselves, to train staff, to how we're getting our supplies and things like that. And it just, we build up a trust with our regular guests that where they felt comfortable, they trust us to come in and dine in the restaurant. And especially being a neighborhood restaurant where they come in to eat, and they pretty much all the guests knows each other, and they have that comfort level and they trust each other. So what we're seeing is that the local diners, they are coming to the local restaurants like ours. Not as much that we like to see, but I think that confidence level is getting better and better. So, but keeping the communication going is, I think, is a key, and that's how you earn trust of your guests, that you're doing the right thing and we're not jeopardizing anybody's safety.
So, I mean, piggybacking on that, restaurants are some of the most highly regulated places in the country. Your inspectors are in there regularly. If there's ever a call, they come immediately. What are we doing to try to, again, reassure our customers, like in the email blast, that the one that we are taking precautions, keep them safe, and that always in this industry translates into keeping our staff safe first. What can we do to try to promote that and allow people to understand we are doing everything we can, and plus to get things regulated properly?
Right. So restaurant is really highly regulated industry, and you're right, absolutely right about that. But which is we are serving food to our guests, and it needs to be regulated like the way it is. But because of the pandemic, what we did was, like, we trained our managers more than what they were trained before. We had them go right away, take Serve Safe and whatever training they had for COVID-19. So we had all that done so they can actually come in and train the staff. And we also increased our management position in the location because there was a more demand of a managerial decision that needed on a day-to-day basis. So what we did was, like, we kind of took our regular employee and promoted some of them to become the manager on day-to-day basis. So they are training all the staff better. The city hasn't really come out and like started really fully enforcing a lot of the whatever regulation they need to. It's all new to a lot of us. So, but we just basically learning as we go, and making the decision as we go, learning, and we're going out there and see who is providing safety classes on these things, how to, and we just doing learning as we go.
Mr. C, I happen to know that you sit on the chair, and I believe a founding member of the Diversity Hiring Initiative for the city of Boston in the hotels. That initiative has been going on trying to get more people of color, local residents, into these industries, into these jobs. What can we do, and what message can we send to the people who are listening to try to direct young people or people of color into this industry, and kind of educating them that we're taking the precautions to make them safe and to create more jobs, the entry level and middle management positions?
That's a good question, Luther. And you've sat in on those meetings, so over the past few years how difficult it's been to increase the numbers. And what we keep coming back to is it's a marketing effort. It's a marketing effort to demonstrate to people of color that the industry is a very good industry, and with good benefits and good pay, and whether it's a union position or a non-union position. And frankly, I just, the excuses over the years from the industry has been that it's not, that they've tried and it hasn't worked. I think it's an excuse, and they've tried, but you just have to get smarter. And we're working really hard, as you know, through the best training programs. We're working hard in terms of marketing to certain areas of the city, and I think we're having some successes. We've hired an ombudsman, as you know, to be a part of the group, to keep us on track and help us find a way through this to do a better job. So it's not an easy one. And by the way, the pandemic has put a number of roadblocks on it as well, because it's the situation is so dire in terms of positions, filling positions. It's very difficult to hire right now when the business is so soft, and hotels citywide are running 30% occupancies at best, and the city will probably finish the year at around a 30 to 35% occupancy at best. So when you hear those kinds of numbers, you realize it's not good for anyone. And but we're working on it, and we need more participation by more people to join us in that effort.
I obviously want to give any of you a time to wrap up, say anything that you want to get the message out. We have a captive audience, so people who are trying to help other people get these jobs. So Rama, we'll start with you if you don't mind, and then Solomon, and I'll finish up with Mr. Kalala. And of course, Alicia, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'm not on mute. Okay, thank you, Lothar. So I think what everybody has shared is very important, because this is a moving target. These things are moving every day. So we need to be very attentive to changes, to quickly adapt, not just set course and think, oh, everything's gonna work. It's just, we need to constantly monitor things to see if that measure that we did is going to work. For example, yesterday we just announced that we're opening the Moxie downtown next Thursday. And I had to recall the union employees yesterday, and I called them, and they're so happy to come back. But we have to have a reorientation the first day before the hotel is open to make sure they feel comfortable, the new regulations, what the guests are going to expect. Because if we don't communicate with them, then how are they going to communicate with our guests? So as we see, we have a plan. But do we need to adapt to that plan in a week? Probably, because things would evolve constantly. But I think that one of the things, and responding to the question you just asked, David, about hiring, and was looking, it has to do with the people of color, has to do with a career. Hospitality is a career, it's not just a job. It is a career that is very rewarding. It has tons of passion. And I have just on the Newberry like 140 people between furlough and layoff before COVID that got delayed because of construction got stopped in Boston. But the staff is so engaged, even through email, through other ways, that they just can't wait to come back, because they say, we feel like family. This is what I want to do. I want to open the doors. I want to be there. So it's really that hard connection that once you find a job that is not only pays you well, but also gives you life fulfillment. And that's one of the things through marketing that we can portray. This is a career, and it's not for everybody, but it's for some. And that's why I was talking about skills that has to do that attitude. If you have that desire to serve and you go out of your way, this could be a great place for you to start working. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to add in, one of my biggest concerns right now is Congress having let the additional $600 a week for UI benefits lapse at this point. And the workers that I'm probably most concerned with are the workers in the hospitality industry, where we know this is a long, slow march back to normal, right? We know that capacity will be, certainly below 100% for a long time, and certainly very, very low for a long time. And so there's just not the ability to rehire everybody now or even in the very near future. And so those folks who are holding on to their hospitality career with the hopes of coming back to it are ones who are relying on those UI benefits. And we know that unemployment insurance does not replace 100% of your earnings. And we also know that these are workers that, may be on the lower end of the wage spectrum, and may also have other family members that are in the same position. And so that extra $600 a week was really helping a lot of people pay their rent, to help put food on the table. And I'm really very concerned going forward that if we don't put more of a floor under those workers who are not going to be instantly recalled, like those in the hospitality industry, that it's not only going to mean their economic fortunes are going to be diminished, but also, that's spending that doesn't happen in the rest of our economy too, right? We are all in this together, and the connectivity between not just the virus, but also the economic circumstances of everybody is really important. And so, the more that we can put, even though the restaurant industry and the hotel industry is very highly regulated, in some ways, the more that we can put structures in place so that people feel safe going to restaurants, that they feel safe going to hotels. And you guys are really good at doing that. You've had a long history of, practicing all sorts of safety kinds of protocols, the more we can do that and everybody playing their part, the more people we can put back to work.
And Alicia, I would say transferable skills. And the service and the attitude, it is a transferable skill. So maybe like there will be job losses, but there will be new opportunities for things. So how are we moving and tapping into that? And within each organization, if there's new jobs that are created, are any of our workers have skills that can do that? And that's what we're looking in the organization. And the Newberry is a very specific situation because it was closed due to renovation, but we can't wait to open full service luxury property. So it's just going to require, what do we need to do? And as things are created, and maybe, for example, it might be a transfer from hotels to restaurants or restaurants to hotels as you flow. But once you have that skill, which is taking care of people, there will be opportunities. So it will be looking into tapping what are the opportunities. Like there's tons of things that now being done online, like just this training, it could have been a live session a year ago, right? So what are the things that are being created that can support, that create opportunity for those transferable skills?
Absolutely, and I think Solomon oh, sorry about that.
I just wanted for one quick second and ask Mr. C, you mentioned that the occupancy rates are low 30s or lower right now. Where normally would we be, just so we can have a comparison to where we would be?
Well, we're at about probably 40%. We might finish the year at about 40% of the occupancy that we would have in 2019 or what we would have had this year. So it's the city runs about 80% occupancy for the year. So we're looking, if we finish at around a 35%, which is likely, and it looks like that's what's going to happen, unless that bumpy long road, we find a turn in it and things move along a lot faster. We all want to be positive. I'm very positive, a positive thinker, positive guy, but and obviously we will get through this, but that road is so uncertain right now. But Raylor's right in the discussion on the skill sets and the type of attitude and the type of person that's going to make it in this business. And there are fewer jobs. That doesn't mean that those fewer jobs can't be filled by new people coming to our industry and coming into the system, because there are people that are leaving the system. I mean, we know that the stats are there. There are people leaving it based on what they've been experiencing they've loved it for many years, and then this period has been tough on them, and they need to be in something they know is more certain. So we will welcome anyone into this industry with the skill set is important, but the attitude, the aggressive hospitality, care and concern for serving our guests more so than ever before, based on what we were saying earlier, and how people are going into restaurants uncomfortable until we've made them comfortable. I don't know if I've ever thought about being uncomfortable going into a restaurant before, but people do now until we show them the signs that we know what we're doing, we know what they want, we know how to take care of them, and we don't, frankly, need to be regulated through that any more than we are. I mean, our position is during our training and what it was told, how do you market that? You market it through everything you're doing. You market it through your websites. You market it through your emails, and letting them know that you're following all city protocol, state protocol, CDC protocol, and then they need to see it when they're there. They need to see the cleanliness. They need to see us cleaning during shifts and during the day, not just at night when no one's there. So we were always clean before, but we weren't demonstrating it enough, and now we are. But I mean, I jumped on a couple of different things there, but that could be my wrap up. Thank you.
I would add, sorry, may I say something? It's about adding to the protocols, which it needs to happen, is the engagement. So if we show engagement with our team members, associates, employees, that's what they're going to communicate to our guests. So for example, I told you I have a lot of employees that were in the Newberry before renovation on temporary layoff. So we created an award and they get to nominate people, what are they doing while they're out. And the amazing things our staff have done, like learning how to bake cakes, or people have done leadership courses, or help the community. We have employees that have helped people pay their taxes. And is what are they using this time that they would normally never get? And some of the people say, well, this is the time your kids are gonna say, the year of the virus, my mom spent 5 months with me, that would never happen. So how you spin the situation and make the best out of it. But also is the level of engagement. How you get that engagement with your customers? Well, you need to do that with your staff first, because they're going to be the first line. Yes, you have managers, but the managers don't have the touch points of every interaction with a guest. Think about a doorman in a normal occupancy might have 500 or more, depending if they're events, touches of opportunities with a guest, of an interaction. And a manager might have 10% of that. So if that staff member is engaged, it's going to make the difference. So what are we doing to engage our people? Not only the ones that will come back, but the new ones. And yes, what David said is true. There's people that are going to say, this is not for me anymore. But we're going to welcome people that really want to serve people and want to be engaged and be in a dynamic environment, industry. And I always say when I hire people, this is you love or hate. Either you love the hospitality industry, or if you want a 9-to-5 job, this is not for you. You want to be here because you enjoy serving people. You get satisfaction from writing a letter, for getting someone, making the difference in someone's life. You create memories, and that is what we want. And those people are welcome to come, and we'll, as we rebuild our industry, we'll have space for them, and we want them, and we want to grow them and make a career for them. Thank you.
Alicia, I think we might have some questions from the audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely.
It would be great. Yeah, it would be great to get Solomon's closing remarks of what he thinks the restaurant industry, can think about moving forward too. Solomon, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I think in the restaurant industry, we are going to need more managers than more of an entry level position. As we move forward, I think more of the small restaurants, or we are going to become more of a high tech, more of like using more tech friendly, how to take orders, to tabletop ordering system, to until we get comfortable. So I think the need going to be is the managerial position in the front of the house, and of course the demand is in the kitchen is always before even COVID started, I think we lost a lot of kitchen employees to the construction boom that we have going on in the city of Boston. So there is a huge shortage of kitchen worker right now. So we basically going to need that, fill that demand as we get to the normal operating. So yeah.
Thank you. Alicia, any questions you want to identify?
Yeah, I think the only lingering question in my mind was, thinking about the future and how these things get managed, as we are likely to see caseloads fluctuate and things like that. And I don't know if any of the panelists have thought about, Rama said we need to be very reactive to how these things in these conditions change. I'd just be curious to know, like, do you have sort of these contingency plans in mind about what happens? For example, there was a mention in the Globe yesterday about possibly rolling back some of the reopening. I'm just curious, how do we think about that going forward, or how might that be managed?
I think the key to that is going to be the adaptability and rolling with punches and dealing with what comes next. I don't know if anyone else on the panelists want to address that.
Luther, say that again. What did you just say? I'm sorry.
Adaptability, being adaptable and changing. We're an industry that's used to, changing with the wind and making people happy at the moment. So I think, one of the strengths people in this panel and us in this industry is we're able to change. We want to be able to change and adapt. So obviously no one wants to have a roll back, but we're ready to do what's necessary for the greater good of the city and the country, I believe.
Well, you know what? I just throw this out. Unlike a recession, unlike 911, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, you could see that there was it wasn't going to be that long. In this particular case, we have no clue. And secondly, when articles like that come out into the globe, they really do, frankly, more harm than good. I mean, we're stymied as it is, and to have the sort of press articles that speak to something like that, when I'm not sure they know as much as they maybe even profess to know. But that said, it's very difficult to try to change things immediately because there is no end in sight on this. We know it will end. We know there'll be a vaccine. We know all of that. I trust all of that. But I think at this point, it's what you end up doing is you open your hotel and there is a surge and you have a couple of choices. You make cuts. You do whatever you have to do. You do on a shorter term basis when there are other times when we've had softening in demand or issues or like a recession, and you keep evolving in that way, because you're still not going to stop marketing, and neither will your competitors. But and you might close again for a while, which I think is a sad state of affairs. I think that it's important that we all get open and we all get moving, and we be positive through this whole experience. But when there's no light at the end of the tunnel, this is a very different situation. It's not really a question of adapting. It's adapting in terms of the financial piece more than anything else. If the customers are not there and they're not flying and the planes are empty or at 50%, we can't change that.
Well, and that brings up a really good point as well, that the airline industry's already gotten one bailout and they're asking for a second one, right? Like I have not seen that kind of support for the hotel and the restaurant and the rest of the hospitality industry that connects to the travel industry. I mean, we've had the PPP, but not everybody got access to it. Not everybody maybe got as much support from it as they needed, and it's not forever. And so I'm wondering, are there other supports that could be put in place for the industry because of this great uncertainty? And you guys are really like the canaries in the coal mine, right? Every single time that there's a change in this virus, you are on the front lines of that. Do you see any sort of supports that could be put in place to preserve the infrastructure that is the hotel and the restaurant industry, so we don't lose more businesses permanently?
That's a great question.
It's too good of a question.
Maybe to talk about. I think we're really going to focus on what we do for workers. We know the industry is in trouble. We hope that the federal government and we know that the local government is working with us. So I believe Trin may have a question from one of the guests. Trin, if you want to chime in.
Sure. I don't know if David, Solomon, or Rama wanted to answer or respond to Alicia's questions on the hotel and hospitality support and so-called bailout. Did you guys want to chime in or respond to that?
You know what? The only thing I would add to that that I could say, because a lot of that PPP money was so much of it was due to try to help the restaurant industry, and it wasn't enough, and it's never going to be enough. And I think the organizations like MRA locally and the NRA nationally, I think just did a terrific job in helping. But maybe the next round is to help ensure that that the businesses stay stabilized and don't go out of business, like our taxes, our property taxes, our real estate taxes, and then also perhaps a bill that would help us from any liability during this time that we're all open, we're getting open, and we'll be all open at some point. And we have concerns about our liability in that. And I know they've talked about a bill in both cases. And I think that the only thing I would say next is maybe those two items would be very helpful. So I don't know how you feel about that, being your business.
Yeah, so if I may, I think one company that's basically got away with all this is the insurance companies. So if there is any legislation that could come out that where, anything that we filed for, they basically denied us by saying that pandemic doesn't cover your policy. Well, then what does it cover, right? We weren't prepared for this either. So if there is way to get some legislation done to get the insurance companies to come out on the table and help the restaurant industry out, that would be great. And also looking into the first PPP money was more of in general, but it wasn't specific to the restaurant. The restaurant industry, the hospitality industry has different needs, and our payroll is also run different than a lot of general businesses. So it will be on the second round, if there is a way to get some specific to the restaurant industry, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Salman. Rama, did you want to respond?
So what I wanted to say that yes, any help that is added to our industry will be welcome. But I think also there's the personal responsibility of what are we doing individually. So yes, the threat that we could go to phase 2 or phase 1, it's always there, but it starts with each individual. Are we following the protocols? Are we doing what we have to do? Are we communicating? If we get help, yes, it will be great for the insurance and more support for the jobs that are going to be lost longer than other industries. But we can just wait and say, okay, phase 1 is coming back. What are we doing on an everyday basis from the things we do have control over to make sure that we create that environment of trust, that, like our customers are feeling comfortable coming back. And yes, there's the outside environment, which is the economy is like a bubble, right? So, there's things that we need to think about, but I think the two sides, what help can we get? And then what on our personal side we can contribute. And then as leaders, we make sure that our organizations are engaged and are constantly communicating. So the threat is going to be there. Like I come from an area where there's always hurricane threats. And I've been through shutdowns and total hotel devastation and shutdown. And yes, I agree. Pandemic is different because it doesn't have an end date. Hurricane passes, you destroy, you reconstruct. But there's a threat always every year of it happening. So how do you prepare and train your people to manage the situation? And I think that's, I'm not going to wake up every day, this is going to happen again, just like every year, a hurricane can come, or it could be a snowstorm. It's what are we doing with our best people and train them to keep them updated and, and communicate? Because if they know that the behavior and the customers' behaviors is going to affect the facing, then how we make sure we get that to keep the business open, because everybody wants to work. And so I would say those two things are very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Rama, and thank you all of you for your responses thus far. That's great insight to, such a black hole that we're seeing. As David said, usually there's a direction or light, at the end of the tunnel. We sometimes see this light, but then we have to retract. And so when Alicia had talked about, can we have a full-fledged economy and being back to so-called normal again without a vaccine and without the pandemic under control? I mean, I think those are real questions. And all of your responses, Salman, yours on restaurants and how you're changing the workforce to reflect some of these unknowns, is very courageous. So thank you for your insight on that. We have some great questions from our audience. My goodness. So I'm just going to go down these questions. The first question, and any of the panelists should chime in and try to answer to the best of your ability. The first question is from Marion Beatty from the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. And her question is, along with attitude, what certifications and training is needed to skill up an existing furloughed employee and new employees that want a hospitality career?
So I would say, I was talking about, obviously, each individual is different. I would look into transferable skills and see what they have already. And also, there's people that are trainable, like they adapt. So that adaptability has to do with the learning capacity also. And so just the example that someone shared about how he shifted his staff to doing different things, but stay employed, that's very, very important. So I think depending on the specifics, if people already are in the different part of the industry and want to move on, we need to see what they already have, or is there something that they need to learn? But if they have the desire to learn, is something that you get up in the morning, it's like you have to have this curiosity, and that would drive you to make things and changes.
That's great. Now, Solomon, you talked about how you're hiring more managers and workers with IT skill set. How are you, redoing some of or reprioritizing the skill set as you're hiring? Because Marion is talking about, job readiness, attitude in the certification, but, is there anything else that, folks should be looking for while they're ramping up their training program?
The training is more specific to the restaurant or this industry that you'll be applying or working at. So we do have the managers that already trained, that will be training on the technology part of the work. So it's not really anything specific that we are doing, but it's more of like on demand that changes that we are making to train, because it's such a moving, fast moving part of the business that's happening. We were never part of this, and all of a sudden we have to adapt to all this new way of running a restaurant. So it's basically we training as we go.
So are the cooks needed in your kitchen and in your restaurant industry? And is there anything different that they should be aware of and incorporated in their training process? For instance, like a COVID safety certificate or safety health certificate in addition to what they've already learned?
So I don't think officially there is any COVID safety certificate that's there yet or required. But basically what we are doing is our managers, including from our chefs, head chef to our front of the house managers, they already went to ServSafe certificate where they have a new training or for COVID-19. So they're basically coming and training the new cooks. And depending on how much involved they are in the kitchen, then we also sending that individuals to offsite training to make sure that they take that training course.
Great, thank you. The second question is from Ty Irwin from Pine Street Inn, and this is for David. Ty said that he stayed in a hotel in Virginia and signs urging masks were everywhere, but no one was enforcing it. So we saw several guests not wearing masks. How can a hotel enforce this policy without confrontation? And what would make Ty, who's a customer, feel safe? And I think that's really important because it goes back to what you said earlier about how you went to a restaurant, how you went to other hotels to get a feel of what is needed from a customer base, And then you yourself went back to the hotel in a leadership role to rethink about how you should do customer service in the hospitality industry. Can you answer that and talk a little bit about how that was done? You're on mute, David.
All right. Am I there? Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
can hear you now.
Okay. All right, Ty, that's a great question. I'm going to answer that, and I'll be as brief as I can be. Firstly, that's not a very well-run property if they are not wearing masks. I don't. Is it in the state of Massachusetts? Did he say? Do we know that?
He said it was in Virginia.
Virginia. Okay, and I don't know what the state ruling is there, but. Here in Massachusetts, I can tell you the rule is that masks have to be worn indoors and outdoors. If they change that, we'd probably still have guests wear masks, at least for the time being, because we've had that conversation with our team over a number of days. And when the guests arrive at the hotel, there's signage and there's a doorman or a bellman and there's front desk people that immediately let them know they must be wearing a mask, and we require it. If a guest says, I don't intend to wear a mask while I'm staying with you, we have a scenario that's already been written where we explain that is our policy, and so we're following the state and city policy. And if they would like us to make them a candidate to stay at another hotel, we'll make the reservations for them. You do it with a certain level of decorum, and you do it with some training. But we require our staff to wear masks, everyone, managers to everybody. And we require our guests up at the rooftop pool and when we open the restaurant and when we open the hotel, it will be the same procedure. So it was not right. But again, I don't know what the state law is there. We would require it and do now for the restaurant up at the rooftop. We've had some people that are, and this is what he's also asking, I guess, that have sort of shunned it. They know they can, once they get seated, they can take them off. Then they get up to maybe go to the restroom or to go talk to someone. And our staff immediately lets them know that they must put their mask back on. And if they continue to violate that for the safety of others and others to feel comfortable, we tell them they have to leave and they can't stay. So that you have to enforce that rule, and it has to have some teeth. Or again, we go back to what place do you want to go to dinner? You want to go to a place where you're comfortable and that you trust it, and you trust that it's well run for your safety. And that is not a place that sounds like it's well run for Ty or anyone else's safety. So, I don't know if that.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. That makes a lot of sense. Rama, did you want to chime in on compliance and how you're thinking about that? And I think from a hotel perspective, you have standards, you have rules, you have all the regulations, but then you also have workers, right? I mean, you have workers who are serving, but then they're kind of also playing the compliance officer role as well. I mean, you're all saying customer service is really important, but then they're also playing some kind of compliance officer. So how do workers balance that, and how do you put that into a person? Like if I were a server and I'm working in the hotel and I want to provide the best customer service experience, which you all talk about in the hospitality industry, I want to do that, but then I also have to be the bad cop to tell you that you're not wearing your mask. So how's that going to work for workers?
So nobody wants to be the police officer. We agreed on that. Nobody. Doesn't matter, a manager or anybody. But we do have to follow the standards. And it's how we engage with people. If it's a returning customer or a guest, you already have a rapport. But how do you establish a rapport that you have a conversation? So it's very different. Me saying, please leave because you're not wearing a mask. So maybe if they're in a group of people, you talk to someone, you address them with politeness, obviously, and respect, and ask them, please, for the safety of your staff and the regulations based on the state of Massachusetts, we would actually like for them to wear a mask. If they don't have one, we will provide one for them. So it's really how you ask. And when you, in my experience, and this is something I do in a training with staff when there's conflict, before they go to HR to do a complaint, it's like, it's always easy to say when you blame someone, you did something wrong, people are going to be defensive. But if you share how that person's behavior makes you feel, it's a different story. So if I say you're wrong, you have to leave, you're not following the rules, you're going to feel offended. That's your first reaction. But if I say, Train, you not wearing a mask makes me feel that you're not taking care of my safety and my, the establishment and other guests, you most likely are going to say, oh, Rima, that wasn't my intention. My intention was that I guess my mask is uncomfortable. Maybe we can provide a better mask. So it really has to do with the approach and how we train our staff to deal with difficult situations. Yes, there's going to be that kind of guest that's going to scream, and I guess the lighting here is a little tough, so sorry for that. But that we will have to escalate to another manager to take care of it. But I think on the first level is giving our staff the tools not to be oppositional, but to have the other person be in, if someone says something that makes me feel uncomfortable and I share that, is very different than saying you are the bad person, you did this. It's like what you said caused this on me, and most likely the person is going to apologize. That's the usual 95% of the people will do that. So it really has to do with the training. So we will have to, and the majority, I have traveled and I did in May to Florida before all this happened. And I was in Washington City in June, before everything started getting out of hand, when everything opened up. And I have to tell you that Massachusetts and people in New England are, comparing to every other state, they're really following the rules. There might be one person here and there, but the majority of the people have group consciousness, which is in other places they don't have that. So I think that helps, but we might have that off person that's traveling from another place that we will just have to bring up to our standards.
If I can chime in for a second, I want to talk maybe the adaptability and we made those changes here, and then we have people visiting from other states. It was something that we did training staff on how to talk to people who were breaking the rules. So I think that type of training is generally done per property, but the industry is used to, now I want to say confrontation, but dealing with the general public.
Thank you, Luther. I'm sure because you're, Bestcore has been on the front line of doing really competitive training for workers in the hospitality. David, did you want to chime in and say something?
I'm just going to say, because this is I think a compliment to in this market, and maybe because the governor and the mayor have done such a good job of articulating, the standards and the policies. And so for the month and a half, 2 months that we've been open at the rooftop pool, and we require it, and we don't get confrontational, trust me, that's not it at all. We've had a couple of people that we've had to ask when they get up, could they please? Immediately they apologize. And in most cases, we thought we'd have a lot of people just not wanting to wear them, but they wear them. We got a pretty well-trained and understanding group in the state, and especially now I think in the city. And I think that has a lot to say, a lot to do, and it says a lot about our political leaders, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm sure that happens in other states and they let it go. And it's not about being confrontational, it's asking and they'll do it, but we're gonna require it in the hotel. And I know some hotels are saying they're not gonna force it, but now that the ruling has changed, I think that we do have to obviously enforce it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, and thank you all for, I'm sure that's just such a hot topic in terms of compliance and safety training and ways in which we can go about addressing it. I want to shift over a little bit, and I'm going to be a little bit selfish because I threw in a question and I've been waiting for quite some time. I do want to, I've been reading, hearing a lot from our workforce training providers, community college presidents, faculty, as many outlets as possible about barriers to coming back to work. for workers. And one of it is, of course, childcare. And so, so one is, I know Alicia had worked on a survey and recently published an article in the Washington Post on what workers think about childcare and the barriers that it is, you know, causing. And then two, for the employers, Solomon, Raymond, Rama, and David, how are employers thinking about, you know, childcare and support for workers as they're coming back? Everybody wants workers to come back, and we want them to be fully productive. But if childcare is a major issue, how are we addressing it as employers, and then, you know, as a city as well? Alicia, did you want to talk a little bit about your work with the childcare, and then I'll let the employers chime in?
Yeah, just to put the problem in perspective for folks, we at Northeastern did a national panel survey of working parents between, ironically, Mother's Day and Father's Day this year. It was 2,557 working parents we surveyed. And among those, 13%, so more than 1 in 10 of those parents, said that they either had to reduce their hours or they lost a job solely because of childcare. Not because their business shut down, not because their employer furloughed them, but because of childcare. And, you know, a lot of this is also, you know, a loss of productivity. So on average, working parents were losing 8 hours a week. So basically 1 working day a week, which as a working parent with 4 kids, that feels about right to me. Don't tell the provost at Northeastern, but it's hard juggling that. And a lot of it's falling on women. So in our survey, among the women who became unemployed during the pandemic, 25% of them said it was because of childcare. And remember, this is, you know, largely when school was still in session in a lot of places. So there was some kind of remote learning that might have entertained your kid for like an hour or two during the day. But now we've moved into the summer where not all summer camps were running. So 2/3 of the summer camps were not running in June. And now we're looking down the barrel of the fall where a lot of schools will be hybrid or entirely remote learning. And so a lot of the stopgap measures that parents had put in place, you know, for the 3-week school was closed, the 3-month school was closed through the summer, are just not going to cut it long term for an entire school year. And so I really expect that we will see this childcare crisis really take a toll on the ability of parents to juggle childcare and still stay employed throughout the school year. So I would love to hear from any of the panelists about the kinds of things employers are thinking about. I know some employers are doing surveys to even ask their staff, you know, what are your plans for the fall and what can we do to help?
It's a very interesting question. Sorry. And I think the childcare issue is one that is a problem regardless of the pandemic, okay? Because that's one of the reasons women have a gap. It has to do with childcare, okay? But besides that, just not being able to provide childcare, I think when we get back to the levels of occupancy that we had before COVID, that's when you really would see the impact, because people might be able to just say, I cannot work, and there's means. And we have to see, because there was the family leave that Massachusetts was going to implement in June next year with pay that we have been all contributing. Is that going to be delayed? We don't know, because that might be something that we have to see what things are in there. But even if we just do the unpaid time, I think employers are going to look into being, employees need to be flexible. We need to be flexible too. We need to look at what are the needs. You cannot force someone if they don't have, they cannot leave the kids unattended. So what are going to be the things that we're going to be working on? And even on a labor environment, we're going to have to work and get flexible to make sure that we can get the services to our guests and our customers. And then at the same time, how can we take care of it? But I do agree that this is also an opportunity for a new industry, because maybe there's going to be people that are going to be displaced that might have the opportunity or their actual training to get certified and be able to take care of kids. Think about it. You know, more homeschooling, other things that could be created that were not happening before. And if people have the opportunity and have the skill set, they might be able to tap into that opportunity, even if it's just for a year. So I see like the problem, but also I see that there might be different solutions. And some people that are displaced that already take care of, let's say housekeepers, that obviously that's a very driven occupancy position. If you don't have rooms to clean, you need less of them, right? So they usually take care of people, they clean, they do those things. Are these people trained to do other things? Is this going to be an opportunity for creating something about childcare? And I know there's obviously some regulations and we have to go through that, but that will be an interesting thing to explore. Because if you already have that attitude of being caring, could you do it in a different setting? Would the state open up and allow other types of childcare, facilities that are not the, like buildings? And how can we manage that need? But also it's going to depend how soon the schools open. So, it's just that moving target. It's like, we don't know. If they open in October, then it's a month situation, right, for school. But if they're not open until January, then it's a different situation. So I think we need to adapt, but it's going to allow opportunities for other things to happen and other jobs to be created.
David, Solomon, Luther, anybody want to chime in on childcare?
So we, in our business, we haven't really looked into childcare just in general, but what we did is that we kind of like adapted our business to the current situation. Prior to COVID, our business we had two shifts. We had lunch shift and a dinner shift, where we catered to the business community in the lunch hours. Then it was more of the community and the regular diners that came in for dinner service, which is the late night, afternoon, evening services. So what we did is we kind of like combined both of them and made one shift available for our guests. So we basically, instead of opening at 11 o'clock, now we open at 2 o'clock. We cut down a couple of hours at the beginning of the shift. Then we also, instead of closing at 10 o'clock, we basically closing at 9 o'clock. So basically, we made one shift available so the employees can work one shift and they could spend the rest of the time with their family and stay home and take care of their kids in the daytime. So that's one of the things we did. So it didn't really, not as specific to the daycare, but it kind of like falls into that because the employees could stay home in the daytime and take care of the kids.
That's why we eat at your restaurants.
I would just add to Solomon said by just saying it's a very creative way to look at it, given the industry, because typically it's not something that the industry has dealt with, and it is going to be a growing concern. And I just think I just want to say that's a very good point. At least you're attempting something, and it's another way to look at it, and being flexible to help. So. Good.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna add that just quickly, like, customers are really very conscious and smart about where they want to spend their funds and their money. So Solomon, your approach about having service hours for your workers and your staff so that they can be home with their families, those are good values to have. So me as a customer, I would put my money towards there. I would eat there, and I would be at restaurants and hotels where they have those values up front. And so, while you're thinking about reopening safely, I think here's an opportunity for employers to do it responsibly as well. So, consumers, especially in Greater Boston and in the state, want to know where they should spend their money. And so when employers put those value statements up and they present themselves that way, customers like me and hundreds and thousands and millions will flock towards your businesses, because you're not only opening safely, but you're opening responsibly as well. So thank you for what you do. Luther, did you want to add to what Best Core is doing around childcare and things like that?
Best Core has been working with Local 26 for the past couple of years, looking for resolutions for their union employees. We really think that we start with them, hopefully the trend will. Marie Downey has been spearheading the project, working with Carlos, the president of the union now, and they are looking for many options. As Mr. C alluded to, you know, hotels are generally running 24 hours a day, and they have generally 3 shifts of staff going in. None of those shifts really are conducive with normal school or daycare hours, but we've definitely been, there's some employees that are definitely a little bit more adjustable, has been highlighted even more so with COVID. You know, with the schools being closed first, there were people who had to take leave off of, you know, to take care of their kids before the hotels or restaurants even closed. So it is something that's currently in front of us, and it has been. And I think with the leadership, we've been trying to just figure out a better way to maintain it. Obviously, there just needs to be more daycare services available off hours or for real working hours, and that's needs to be spearheaded to our local government.
Thank you. I do want to be mindful of time, and we're at time for the panelists. So first, I want to say that we had a lot of questions and interest from our audience. So that's just reflective of how valuable your feedback has been from the panelists. So thank you. We do have additional questions, so we're going to try to filter that out offline and then get answers to those questions. So I want to thank the audience for also joining the webinar. We know that you're very busy with your schedule, so thank you for making time to learn and allow us to be a resource and be your supportive partner. So thank you. Special thanks to all of our panelists here who have also taken the time from their busy schedule, who have multiple roles and jobs, especially now, to really share your perspective, because at the end of the day, the audience who are training providers, colleges, and community partners, they want to know how they can be helpful in reopening as well. So this is extremely valuable to all of us. So thank you to Justin Polk, who is our IT staff, who you don't see, but who has been putting this together. Thank you, Justin, for your work. And then just a reminder that to sign up at owd.gov for our listserv to get additional invites, resources, guidelines, and RFPs. And then also to let you know that this webinar is recorded, so it will be on our website, and we're happy to follow up with additional information as well. Big thanks to BestCorps, Luther, and Marie for doing all this legwork to putting this great panel together, from questions to time to logistics. We know this is extremely hard on your end, so thank you, Luther and Marie and BestCorps. With that, I'll close, and I want to thank you everyone for your time and looking forward to following up.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.